समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
आप समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
There is interesting news from Dhaka in Bangladesh. I would even say that under the circumstances, in the big picture, positive news from Bangladesh in the sense that this is the first major step now to indicate that the political process is really on. There were doubts about the election process, particularly after the recent violence, and many skeptics had said that maybe the elections will be postponed, maybe they will not take place. You can't be 100% sure of anything. The chief advisor, Professor Muhammad Yunus, has been saying, he's been telling the world that elections will take place on due date. However, the first important conversation or affirmation of the fact that an election will take place is the arrival this Thursday of Tarique Rahman. Tarique Rahman, who's the acting chairman. Tarique Rahman, also called Tarique Rahman Zia. Zia after his father Ziaur Rahman, who was a Bangladeshi general. Ziaur Rahman was a young officer in the Pakistani army who rebelled in 1971 on 25th of March on the night of the crackdown by Pakistani army called Operation Searchlight. He, along with a few colleagues, young officers, rebelled, shot their Punjabi commanding officer in their East Bengal Regiment Battalion in Sylhet and walked out. And a couple of days later, on the 27th evening, on a wireless radio, he also made the first broadcast of a free Bangladesh. So also a freedom fighter. That's why Tarique Rahman is often called Tarique Zia in Bangladesh. It's after him that Tarique Rahman's full name is Tarique Rahman Zia. Tarique Rahman is the acting chairman of Bangladesh Nationalist Party. This is a party that his father had founded, but basically in democratic years, in the years of elections, his mother has shepherded. His mother has shepherded it after his father's assassination in 1981. There was a period for about a couple of years when Abdul Sattar, who also became president for some time, he took over the presidency of the BNP. But then his mother, who had joined politics within months of his father's assassination, she's been running the party since then. His mother, however, has been very sick for a long time. Some rumors are that she's also been on ventilator. He effectively has been running the party. He was exiled in London since 2008. Before 2008, there were many charges against him. In fact, those charges were laid against him not by Sheikh Hasina's government directly, but by the caretaker government. Bangladesh had a system like Pakistan of a caretaker government taking over after the end of the tenure of an elected government. So an election was to be held under a caretaker government. That is something that Sheikh Hasina later repealed. So the incumbent government would hold the next elections. It was a caretaker government between 2006 and 7 that laid these charges against Tarique Rahman. And then when Hasina came into power with the 2008 elections, she piled on more charges against him. The charges against him range from defamation to money laundering to corruption to having assets beyond his known sources of income to mass murder. Mass murder means there was the allegation that he played a role in a bombing, in a grenade attack on a big Awami League rally on 21st of August 2004, in which 24 Awami League workers were killed. More than 500 were injured. This is when his mother Khaleda Zia was in power in her third prime ministership. I will tell you about them as we go along. In this rally, Sheikh Hasina, the rival of Khaleda Zia, the prime minister then, she was speaking from the back of a truck. And much of the Awami League leadership was present there. So a case was made out. It was over this rally that 13 grenades were thrown, causing this carnage. And the case that was made out was that this was a deliberate attack to wipe out the Awami League leadership. That case did not get so much spark then because, after all, Khaleda Zia, Tariq's mother, was in power then. But once she lost power, that prosecution also acquired more energy behind it. With all of these cases, Sheikh Hasina had kept Tarique Rahman out of the country, and Khaleda Zia, she had either kept under house arrest or she had barred her from participating in politics. So she also held her election in 2024 without Khaleda Zia's party, without the BNP participating. The cycle is now turned. At this point, as we know, Sheikh Hasina is in India and her son Sajib Wazid Joy is in exile in Europe, most likely in London as well. It is in this cycle that Tarique Rahman has now arrived. He is arrived as he came out of the airport. He first addressed the crowd. He said, before going to my mother, I am addressing you because, after all, I have come because the country needs me. He's also used very conciliatory language. In fact, he said something like, we must remain calm. The country needs calm. The country needs peace. And he's repeated this thrice in his speech that he delivered immediately as he got off the plane. And then he quoted, within this same speech, he quoted Martin Luther King as well. He said, Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. In the same way, I am saying, I have a plan. I have a plan, and that is why I am meeting you. I'm talking to you even before going to meet my mother. And you know what's been done to my mother for speaking out, for standing for her rights and for democracy. So he's come in now. The only thing that he ducks, is that if you are saying that democracy is being restored and you want a clean, full-fledged election where everybody participates, then how come some parties are being excluded? In this case, how come Awami League is being excluded? That he ducks. He's ducked that in an recent interview to Financial Times in London, saying those who've been convicted of corruption, etc., cannot participate in elections. However, I see in Bangladesh media and the fair Bangladesh media a question being raised that, look, you are conflating quite conveniently allegations with conviction. But you can be quite sure that Awami League will not be allowed to participate in this election. This, unfortunately, has become a pattern in Bangladesh and in Pakistan too. Sometimes you tend to learn bad habits from each other. In Pakistan, the last election was held with Imran Khan's party, Pakistan Tarique Insaf, not being allowed to contest elections. In Bangladesh, at the same time, Sheikh Hasina held her election in 2024 by excluding Khaleda Zia's party from elections. Now, Muhammad Yunus will hold this election, or caretaker government will hold this election in Bangladesh by excluding Sheikh Hasina's Awami League from this election. So this has become a bit of a pattern. At the same time, an election, however imperfect, is still better than no election, because with this, an elected civilian government will come to power. Now, I will not give you all the details of cases against Tarique Rahman, because as we stand, those cases are over. After Sheikh Hasina's government fell, courts in Bangladesh worked overtime and worked at warp speed, to use that line from Donald Trump that he used for his vaccine project while COVID was on. So courts worked warp speed to clear him and his mother of all the charges, including the charges over the 2004 grenade attacks. So he's now clean. He's got no charges against him. He's also talking like a statesman. He's using very conciliatory language. In his interview with Financial Times, for example, he said the revolution will not be fully realized until a free vote takes place. And that is where he said that Awami League, how can those who've been convicted for crimes, how can they participate in elections? He did not clearly say that everybody in Awami League is excluded. This, I would say, was more a statement in evasion than in conciliation. He also asserted that his party is very popular. They are in the position to form a government entirely on their own. But he said, if other parties also want to join in, we'll be open to that. However, remember, he has been very clear in his criticism of Jamaat-e-Islami, because Bangladesh at this point has multiple forces, some on the street, some in mainstream politics. BNP, that is the Bangladesh Nationalist Party of Khaleda Zia, and the Awami League. Sheikh Hasina's party. Those two are the mainstream parties. Also, there is Jamaat-e-Islami, which is also a mainstream party. However, marginal so far in Bangladeshi politics. Very much like the Islamic religious parties in Pakistan, who look very prominent but don't get that much of a vote. Usually, their overall vote remains in single figures. Jamaat-e-Islami, similarly, is not very popular, has not been very popular in Bangladesh, also because of the position they take on Pakistan and on the liberation of Bangladesh. That said, both Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia at different points of time have had Jamaat-e-Islami participate in governments or in coalitions with them, either in government or in the opposition. So it's a very complex politics in Bangladesh. However, at this point, Jamaat-e-Islami has become very popular for two reasons. Number one, that NCP, that is the National Citizens Party, that came into being after the students' protest. So student leaders who led the protest, they got together in February 2025 and they formed a party of their own. That is National Citizens Party or Jatiya Nagarik Party. But you know what? You can be great leaders in that moment of high emotion. And that's what happens very often to young leaders. You can bring down a government, but do you then have the wherewithal to set up a party and win an election? And that's where NCP has been found wanting. And from whatever I read in the Bangladeshi media, fair Bangladeshi media, or the opinion polls, it looks like NCP right now has become very weak. A little bit like the Prashant Kishore phenomenon in Bihar. You can draw a lot of attention, but ultimately you don't have such a power to attract votes. NCP thereby looks weak. There was, however, a space created in Bangladesh public opinion by NCP and others who agitated against Sheikh Hasina and got her out. This space that NCP is seemingly vacating now, that's being taken over by Jamaat-e-Islami. And that's what worries many people in Bangladesh. That's what worries mainstream parties in Bangladesh. That's what worries India as well. And that's why it's important that in a BNP meeting on December 7, which Tarique Rahman addressed from London, he said not very kind things about Jamaat-e-Islami. He reminded people that these are the people whose 1971 record should be remembered. They killed so many innocent people, men, women, also how badly they treated Bangladesh's women. He said, think about what they did to our mothers, our sisters, our daughters. So he's taken a very strong position against Jamaat-e-Islami, probably also because he sees that with NCP's decline and Awami League not being there, Jamaat-e-Islami will become his main challenger. Jamaat-e-Islami has one more strength. Jamaat-e-Islami has feet on the street. They have workers on the ground. They have workers units in every village, as most religious parties do. So their people are going from family to family, home to home with their message, which is also a very fundamentalist religious message. That is the challenge that Tarique Rahman has now walked into. To understand where Tarique Rahman is coming from and also to guess where he might be headed or where he might reach, we have to understand where all this started and the twists and turns that his party, his mother's party, and also Bangladesh politics has had. Because in many ways, Bangladesh politics since 1972, 1971 December came into being, since 1972 when Sheikh Mujib came back, since then Bangladesh politics in some ways has followed the pattern of Pakistani politics. Bangladesh has had two generals rule them. Ziaur Rahman once, I keep saying there was a time when we had Zia's ruling on both our flanks. Ziaul Haq in charge on our west in Pakistan, Ziaur Rahman to our east in Bangladesh. After Zia, they also had Ershad. Bangladesh has also had two long spells of military rule and also unstable governments, periods between military rule and elected governments when they had a lot of uncertainty, they had a lot of violence. However, there is one major difference between Bangladesh and Pakistan. Pakistan, in the 8 years since it came into being, has never had a prime minister, elected or not, has never had a prime minister last 5 years. Never. Bangladesh, on the other hand, has had has had both Khaleda Zia and Sheikh Hasina last more than 5 years, more than once. Khaleda Zia twice. In fact, she was Prime Minister 3 times. The second time, he held again an opposition-less election. She won a huge majority but had to lose power within weeks because people came out on the streets and they refused to accept that election in 1996. Otherwise, 1991 to 1996, she was a legitimate elected Prime Minister. Then she fought back again, rebuilt her politics. 2001, she again won an election and came to power. And then she served a second full 5-year term as a legitimately elected Prime Minister. So she did two. Sheikh Hasina did one from 2096 to 2001. That was her first 5-year term, full 5-year term. And then from 2008 to 2013, 2013 to 2018 to when she held her fourth election, looking for her fourth consecutive term. And by that time, she had become dictatorial, and she said she was going to hold that election without her main opposition party. That turned out to be her undoing as well. That is one big difference between Bangladesh and Pakistan, that in Bangladesh, once elected prime ministers finish their full term. The second thing is, in Bangladesh, after the departure of H.M. Ershad, that was in 1990, after the departure of H.M. Ershad, and he departed when all the opposition, in fact, both Sheikh Hasina and Khaleda Zia combined to get him out, saying that we don't want martial law. People of Bangladesh don't want martial law. They don't want military rulers. We want a fair election. They combined together to restore democracy in their country. Since then, Bangladesh army has not actively intervened to take over power. There was a time when they briefly intervened to establish a caretaker government, but that too under a former governor of the Central Bank of Bangladesh. This was in 2006-07, so that a caretaker government could hold a fresh election. The Bangladesh army since 1990 has shown no interest in taking over power in that country, and they haven't even done so now. That's a big difference. Khaleda Zia, we know a lot more about Sheikh Mujib and Sheikh Hasina Wazid. Khaleda Zia herself has had a tough life. She was married when she was barely 15 to Ziaur Rahman, who was then a young captain in the Pakistani army. Zia fought in the 1965 war in the Khemkaran sector. He had got commando training and intelligence training. He fought in the 1965 war for Pakistan with distinction. If I check internet, I see references that he was awarded Hilal-e-Jurat, which is like Veer Chakra in Pakistan. However, many of the people who know him, particularly his batchmates who are still around, and some of them in fact fought with him as freedom fighters, among the young officers who left Pakistani army to fight with Mukti Bahini. They tell me that Hilal-e-Jurat is probably an urban legend. However, for 1971 war, he was awarded Bir Uttam, which is like the Mahavir Chakra, the second highest gallantry award in Bangladesh. He took over power after the uncertainty and instability following the assassination of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman on 15th of August 1975. Again, there was a period of instability, and then Zia took over, and then he was assassinated in 1981 by his young officers. When he was assassinated, Khaleda Zia was only 36 years old. It was at that point that she was pitchforked into politics. In fact, if I read up on her history, when her husband rebelled and started fighting with Mukti Bahini, the Pakistani army was looking for her. So she came along with her 2 small children into Dhaka, stayed with some relatives. Within a couple of months, by 2nd of July, this revolt started on 25th of March. Looks like she came into Dhaka in May. On 2nd of July, she and her kids had been arrested, and they were kept in a safe house, you might call it, or a temporary prison in the cantonment in Dhaka. The day of the liberation, Zia was in touch with the Indian Army. Ziaur Rahman was in touch with the Indian Army looking for his family, and Lieutenant General Arora, that she and her kids were flown out of Dhaka and ultimately taken to Kumila to meet Ziaur Rahman. It is that complex history. What I'm trying to tell you is that she's also been through very tough times. And then she's faced these cases from the Awami League just as Awami League people have faced cases from their side. There again, Bangladesh politics is not very different from Pakistani politics because there is a cycle of vindictive behavior, of cases and counter cases. Anybody who comes to power files cases against the other. Those guys ultimately go into exile. Then at some point of time, circumstances change or public opinion changes. Those who are exiled come back. Those cases melt away, they disappear. And at the same time, those who've been in power go into exile. If I explain to you two sides of the coin, so the bad side of the coin is that the same cycle is now playing out. Khaleda Zia family is now back and restored. I'm not saying they won elections yet. They are the front runners, but they are now back. All cases are gone. Whereas the other family, that is Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's dynasty, that family is now in exile and they are the ones facing not just these cases, but Sheikh Hasina, in fact, has been given a death sentence in absentia. That is the bad part. That is the bad part because the same vicious cycle is now playing out. The good part is that at least an election is taking place now. The army is not taken over. An election is taking place. The most powerful party, BNP, has already spoken out very strongly against the most dangerous and reactionary elements in Bangladeshi society, the Jamaat-e-Islami. Because if you go really deep into Jamaat-e-Islami's ideology, they for a long time have even believed in reunification with Pakistan as well. That is not going to work in Bangladesh because Bangladesh nationalism right now is very strong. If anything, the nationalist impulse in Bangladesh now believes that Sheikh Hasina had a one-sided relationship with India. And that's the reason Tarique Rahman is now saying that I will deal with India, I will have a Bangladesh first and Bangladesh for all policy, and this will be a more fair relationship with India. He has until now not said anything hostile about India. And remember, when Khaleda was in power, this was still UPA 1 in India. She had come to India. She had had very good meetings with Dr. Manmohan Singh because remember, Bangladesh and India are very closely tied together and the mutual dependence is very strong on both sides. That's why once an election goes through, a new government does come into power, the India question will become foremost because there is a larger public opinion in Bangladesh that the previous government was too soft on India. And the fact that she's in India, Sheikh Hasina, that will also work negatively in that sizable section of public opinion. Of course, the Awami League has its own support base in Bangladesh as well. That is why India will be watching it very, very closely and very, very carefully.